Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we will look at solving quadratic equations. So this is how you do it. You have to make sure one side is equal to 0, then you factorize, then you use the null factor law. So the null factor law says if AB equals 0, then either A equals 0 or B equals 0. It says if something times something gives 0, either the first something is 0 or the second something is 0. All right, let's look at it in action. So we've got 9x squared minus 100 equals 0. Well, step one's done. One side does equal 0. Now we're going to factorize. So hopefully we recognize this as the difference of two squares. Perfect square minus perfect square. The way we factorize the difference of two squares, we get two brackets. So we factorize by square rooting the first. So square root of 9x squared is 3x. Then you square root the second. One bracket gets a plus, one gets a minus. The reason we factorize is so we can use the null factor law. We've now written this as something times something equals 0. So either the first something equals 0. Now if 3x plus 10 equals 0, you can solve that as a linear equation. You subtract 10, divide by 3, you get minus 10 over 3. Now, if you solve 3x minus 10 equals 0, you get x is plus 10 over 3. You can write the solution like this. X is positive or negative 10 over 3. All right, let's look at this one. 8x squared minus 36x equals 0. So one side 0, step one's done. Step two, we're going to factorize. This is another binomial, but this time they have a common factor. So we take out the common factor. So what do I times by 4x to get 8x squared is 2x. What do you times by 4x to get negative 36x? Well, that's negative 9. We've now written it as something times something equals 0. So null factor law tells us either the first something equals 0, so 4x equals 0, x is 0, or the second something equals 0. Now, if 2x minus 9 equals 0, this is a linear equation. You just add 9 and divide by 2, and you get the solution x equals 9 over 2. So then we're done. Let's look at this one. X squared minus 3x minus 40 equals 0. This is a trinomial. One side is equal to 0, so we go to step 2 and factorize. This is how we factorize the trinomials. We find two numbers that multiply to negative 40, add to negative 3. So those two numbers turn out to be negative 8 and positive 5. So now we use the null factor law because we've written it as something times something equals 0. So the null factor law tells us either the first bracket equals 0 or the second bracket equals 0. And we're done. All right, let's look at this one here, another trinomial. So one side equals 0, so now we can go to step 2 and factorize. So the two numbers that multiply to 25 and add to 10 are both 5. So if x plus 5 times x plus 5 equals 0, then there's only one possibility, x equals negative 5. Using the null factor law, either this or this equals 0, both of them give the solution x is negative 5. So when you're solving quadratic equations, often you will have two solutions. Sometimes you have one solution. It's also possible you have no solutions. But for the ones we're looking at, you'll either have two solutions or rarely you will have one solution. All right, let's now look at an example where step 1 is not done for us. So let's say we have something like x squared equals x plus 30. Before we can factorize, one side must be equal to 0. This is actually easy to obtain. All we have to do is get rid of everything on one side of the equation. So I can make this side equal to 0 if I subtract x from both sides. So I get x squared minus x. Remember, these are not like terms, so I can't simplify this. And then on the right-hand side, I'm just left with 30. Now I can subtract 30 from both sides because add 30 and subtract 30 undo each other. So on the right-hand side, I'm left with 0. On the left-hand side, I have x squared minus x minus 30. So now this looks like all the quadratic equations on the previous slide. Because one side equals 0, I can now factorize. This is a trinomial, so I'm going to find two numbers that multiply to this and add to this. The two numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 1 are negative 6 and positive 5. So I factorized, I can use the null factor law. The null factor law says either the first thing equals 0, so if x minus 6 is 0, x must equal 6, or the second thing equals 0. So what's the value of x that makes this bracket equal 0? And that is, of course, negative 5. So I have solved the equation and I'm done. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.